Ex-wife approached the ex-husband at the museum gala until a silent curator addressed her as rightful owner. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main characters. The evening air was crisp as the Grand Museum Gala unfolded in full swing. The high ceilings echoed with soft conversations, laughter, and the clinking of wine glasses. Under the soft, golden lighting, guests adorned in designer gowns and tuxedos moved gracefully through the exhibits, admiring the artwork and chatting with one another. Emma Harper, her deep red dress catching the eye of anyone who passed by, entered the museum with a sense of purpose. She had not seen her ex-husband, Jason Harper, in months, but tonight was different. The invitation to the gala had been unexpected, but she knew this was the perfect opportunity to finally speak to him. The tension between them had been building for years, and the last few months had only made it worse. Their divorce had been messy, filled with unresolved feelings and bitterness. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, something that only Jason could explain. She spotted him across the room, standing near an elegant display of sculptures, his back to her. He looked just as she remembered, tall, with a commanding presence, his dark suit fitting him perfectly. Emma hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the old wounds resurfacing, but she pushed them down. This was not the time for weakness. She gathered her courage and walked towards him, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Jason turned as he heard her approach, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the years apart seemed to vanish. It was as if no time had passed at all, as if they were still married, still bound by their past. Emma, Jason said, his voice steady but cold. I didn't expect to see you here. Emma forced a smile, trying to hide the storm of emotions raging inside her. I could say the same, she replied, her voice smoother than she felt. But I suppose we both have our reasons. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Just as the tension between them was about to break, a soft voice interrupted the moment. Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Harper, the voice said. They both turned to see Olivia Dawson, the museum's silent curator, standing just behind them. She was a woman of few words, always observing, always knowing more than she let on. Olivia's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the charged atmosphere between the ex-couple. She glanced at Emma, then Jason, before speaking again. If I may, she continued, her voice low but certain. There's something you both should know. Emma, she said, turning her gaze to her. You are the rightful owner of this exhibit. Both Emma and Jason froze. Olivia's words hung in the air, like a puzzle piece falling into place. The gala continued around them, but for Emma and Jason, time seemed to stop. Emma blinked in disbelief. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Olivia looked at her with an unreadable expression before nodding slightly. I think it's time you both learned the truth. The silent curator's words echoed in Emma's mind as the weight of the revelation began to sink in. It wasn't just about the art, it was about the past, the power dynamics, and what they had both failed to understand. This was just the beginning. Emma stared at Olivia, the words still echoing in her head. The rightful owner? She repeated, barely able to process what the curator had just said. Jason's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. He looked at Olivia, then back at Emma, as if waiting for an explanation that made sense. Olivia, ever the enigma, stood quietly, observing their reactions. Her calm, almost serene demeanor only added to the tension between them. What are you talking about? Jason finally asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Olivia's eyes met his, and she nodded slightly. It's complicated, she said, her voice soft yet firm. But the truth has always been there, hidden beneath the surface. Emma felt a wave of frustration building inside her. Hidden beneath the surface? She echoed, her voice rising. What does that mean? What truth are you talking about? Olivia took a deep breath, as though preparing to reveal something she had been holding back for a long time. Before your divorce, she began slowly, there was an agreement between you both regarding the ownership of certain pieces in this museum. Emma, you were always meant to be the one to inherit them, not Jason. But over the years that fact was buried, lost in the chaos of your personal lives and the way things fell apart. Jason looked at Emma, his eyes narrowing. That's ridiculous, he said, shaking his head. How could I not know about this? Olivia stepped closer, her voice soft but authoritative. Because it was kept from you, she said, her gaze never leaving his. The museum's board decided, long ago, that Emma would take control of the pieces. It was a legal matter, but the details were not made public. Not even to you. Emma's heart raced as she processed Olivia's words. She had never heard anything about this agreement. The thought of it, of Jason being kept in the dark, sent a pang of guilt through her chest. But at the same time, something inside her stirred, something that had been dormant for years. So what now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Olivia took a moment before answering, her expression unreadable. Now you need to reclaim what is rightfully yours, she said simply. Emma felt a mix of emotions, shock, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite place. For years she had fought for independence, for control over her life after the divorce. She had fought to make a name for herself, to prove she could stand on her own. But now, with Olivia's revelation, it felt as if everything she had built was somehow tied to a past she had tried to escape. Jason, on the other hand, was silent, his face a mask of disbelief. He seemed to be grappling with the implications of what Olivia had just told them. So, what happens to the art now? He asked, his tone betraying a hint of frustration. Olivia looked at him, and then back at Emma. The pieces stay here, she replied. But Emma, as the rightful owner, has the right to decide what happens next. Emma nodded slowly, the weight of the situation settling in. She had never expected this kind of revelation tonight, at a gala, of all places. But now as the reality of it all sank in, she realized that her life, their lives, might never be the same again. Olivia's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer, then she turned and walked away, leaving Emma and Jason standing there, caught in a moment neither of them had ever anticipated. The gala continued around them, the guests oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding in the corner of the room. Emma turned to Jason, her mind racing. There was so much to unpack, so many questions swirling in her head. But as she looked at him, she realized that, for the first time in years, she wasn't sure where to start. The past had just come rushing back, and with it, the uncomfortable truth that she and Jason were no longer the people they once were. The gala continued in full swing, oblivious to the quiet tension now hanging between Emma and Jason. Emma stood still for a moment, processing the weight of Olivia's words. Jason, however, had started to pace, his hand running through his hair, clearly frustrated. This doesn't make sense, he muttered, more to himself than to Emma. Why would nobody tell me about this? Why would this be hidden? Emma's eyes followed him, but she couldn't find the words to respond. The emotions inside her were tangled, surprise, anger, confusion, and the last thing she wanted to do was argue. She had come here tonight expecting to finally face Jason, to have a conversation that might bring some kind of closure. But now, with this new revelation, everything had shifted. What was once a conversation about the past had become something much bigger, something neither of them had prepared for. She took a deep breath and finally spoke, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts. I don't know why no one told you. But that doesn't change the fact that this is what's been true all along. I had no idea, Jason. Jason stopped pacing and turned to face her. His expression softened slightly, but his frustration was still evident. I should have known, he said, his voice quiet, almost to himself. I should have known about this agreement. It feels like I've been kept in the dark all these years, about so many things. Emma nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She knew their marriage had been complicated, full of miscommunications and unspoken resentments. But she hadn't realized how much Jason had been kept from the truth. The realization that their entire marriage had been built on lies and omissions stung more than she expected. She wanted to say something comforting, to explain that they both had their faults, but the words didn't come. Instead, she remained silent, unsure of how to fix something that felt so broken. "Do you want to go somewhere else?" she asked after a long pause, her voice hesitant. "Talk about this privately?" Jason looked at her, his eyes searching hers for a moment before he nodded. "Yeah," he said softly. "Let's get out of here." They walked away from the gala, their steps synchronized but filled with unspoken tension. The night air was cool as they stepped outside, the city lights glowing in the distance. The noise of the party behind them seemed to fade away, leaving a sense of calm that didn't match the storm brewing between them. They found a quiet bench in a nearby park, away from the crowds, and sat down. Jason looked at Emma, his eyes no longer full of anger, but confusion and sorrow. "So what now?" he asked, his voice quiet. Emma sighed and leaned back, looking up at the stars. She wasn't sure what the next step was, what this revelation meant for either of them. "I don't know," she admitted. "I really don't." The silence stretched between them, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Emma thought about what she had built in the years since their divorce. She had worked hard to carve out a life for herself, separate from Jason and the baggage they had left behind. But now, with the art pieces and Olivia's words hanging in the air, she couldn't help but feel like she was being dragged back into a world she had fought so hard to leave behind. Jason, on the other hand, seemed lost in his own thoughts. His gaze was distant, and Emma could tell that he was thinking about more than just the art. He was thinking about everything they had been through, the good times and the bad, and wondering if there was any way to make sense of it all. After a long pause, Jason spoke again. "I'm not sure what this means for us, Emma. But I can't just ignore it." Emma turned to him, her expression softening. "I'm not asking you to," she said quietly. "But whatever happens next, it has to be something we both understand." Jason nodded, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air between them. They didn't have answers. They didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like they were finally being honest with each other. It wasn't the closure either of them had expected, but maybe it was the beginning of something else. Something neither of them could have predicted. Emma and Jason sat in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts. The cold air around them seemed to sharpen the tension between them, but neither of them spoke. Emma's mind was racing, her thoughts spinning in every direction. The revelation about the art collection and her unexpected role as its rightful owner weighed heavily on her. She had never imagined her life would take such an unexpected turn, and now, she had no idea what to do with the information. What did this mean for her future? What did it mean for Jason? Could they ever find a way to move forward from the past, or was this the final piece of their broken relationship? Jason broke the silence first, his voice low and contemplative. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't gotten divorced?" he asked. Emma turned her head slightly to look at him. She had been thinking about it a lot, but she wasn't sure she was ready to answer. "I don't know," she said after a moment. "I mean, sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if we hadn't fallen apart. But then I think about all the reasons we split up, and I wonder if we were ever really meant to be together." Jason nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, I get that," he said quietly. "But part of me wonders if there was something we missed. Something we didn't try hard enough to fix." Emma sighed, her eyes flickering toward the dim lights in the distance. "Maybe," she said softly. "But at this point, I think we both know we've moved on. I've built my life without you, and you've built yours." Jason looked at her, his gaze searching, as if trying to understand the woman sitting beside him, the woman he once knew so well. "You're right," he said slowly. "We've both changed. But it's hard not to feel like there's still something unresolved between us." I don't know if it's just the art, or if it's something deeper. Emma met his eyes, her expression softening. She had always known that their marriage had ended with more questions than answers, but this new revelation about the art collection made everything feel even more complicated. I don't think we'll ever fully understand everything that happened, she said quietly. But maybe it doesn't matter anymore. We can't change the past. We can only move forward with what we know now. Jason sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. I guess you're right, he said, his voice heavy. I just don't want to feel like I missed out on something important. Emma reached out and placed a hand gently on his arm. We both miss things, Jason, she said softly. But we're here now. We can't keep living in the past. They sat in silence again, the weight of their conversation hanging in the cool air. It was true. They could no longer live in the past, no matter how much they wished they could go back and fix things. What had been broken could not be easily mended. But in that quiet moment, something unspoken passed between them. It was as if they had both finally accepted that their past was behind them, and they were now free to shape their own futures, whatever that might look like. Jason stood up first, his hands slipping into his pockets as he looked down at Emma. I think I need some time to process everything, he said, his voice softer now. This has all been a lot to take in. Emma nodded, understanding. I get it, she said. I need time too. We both do. Jason gave her a small, almost sad smile. Take care of yourself, Emma, he said quietly. And maybe we can talk more soon. Emma smiled back, her heart heavy but relieved. Yeah, she said softly. We'll figure this out. As Jason walked away, Emma watched him go, feeling a strange mix of emotions, sadness, relief, uncertainty. But most of all, she felt a sense of peace. It wasn't the peace she had expected, but it was a start. The night was still young, and as she sat alone on the bench, she realized that the story between her and Jason wasn't over. It had only just begun again. The days that followed the gala felt like a blur to Emma. She spent most of her time lost in her thoughts, trying to piece together what had happened, and what would happen next. The revelation about the art collection was still fresh in her mind, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. Her interactions with Jason had been quiet, but the weight of their past hung between them, making it difficult to move forward. She had tried to put it behind her, to focus on the life she had built for herself since their divorce, but the discovery about the ownership of the art had changed everything. She had never been the type to dwell on the past, but now she found herself questioning everything. She spent the next few days visiting the museum, getting to know more about the pieces she was now the rightful owner of. The curator, Olivia, had been helpful, showing her the details of the collection and explaining the history behind each piece. It was fascinating, but it also felt overwhelming. Each painting, each sculpture, was a reminder of the past she had tried to escape. It was difficult to reconcile the person she was now with the life she had once shared with Jason. Emma had thought she had moved on, but now it seemed that everything was tied to the past, whether she wanted it to be or not. She couldn't stop thinking about Jason. She hadn't spoken to him since that night at the park. He had been quiet, distant, and Emma had given him the space he needed. But now, as the days passed, she found herself wondering if she should reach out to him. They had shared so much, both good and bad, and it felt impossible to simply walk away without trying to make sense of it all. But what would they talk about? The art? Their past? The things they had never said? Emma didn't know if they could ever go back to the way things were, but part of her still wondered if there was a way to find closure. She had spent so many years running from her feelings, from the things she had buried deep inside, but now it felt like the past was demanding to be acknowledged. She needed answers, and she wasn't sure if she could find them on her own. That afternoon, Emma decided to go to the museum again. She walked through the halls, her mind racing with questions. As she approached the main gallery, she saw Jason standing in front of one of the paintings, staring at it intently. For a moment, she hesitated. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face him, but there he was, just a few feet away. Without thinking, she walked toward him. Jason turned as he heard her approach, his eyes meeting hers. For a second, neither of them said anything. They simply stood there, staring at each other, as if trying to figure out what to say next. "I didn't expect to see you here," Jason said finally, his voice a little hoarse. Emma smiled faintly. "I could say the same," she replied. "But I guess we both have our reasons." Jason nodded, his eyes not leaving hers. "Yeah, I suppose we do." The silence between them felt heavier than it had the night of the gala. There was so much unspoken between them, so much left unresolved. Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," she said quietly. Jason looked at her, his gaze softening. "Me too," he admitted. "I've been thinking about a lot of things I never took the time to understand before." Emma's heart ached. She had spent years resenting him, blaming him for everything that had gone wrong, but now, hearing him say those words, she felt a sense of compassion that surprised her. "I think we both have things to apologize for," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason nodded slowly. "Yeah," he agreed. "We do." For a long time, neither of them spoke. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation either of them had imagined. It wasn't a moment of anger or accusation. It was just two people, standing in the middle of a room full of art, both of them trying to make sense of the years that had passed, the mistakes they had made, and the possibility of moving forward. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. Jason looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think we should." And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt a sense of hope, not for the past, but for what might come next. As Emma and Jason sat in front of the painting, a strange quietness filled the space around them. The crowd in the gallery seemed far away, and the once bustling museum now felt like a distant memory. There was only the two of them, the art, and the weight of everything they had left unsaid. Emma took a slow breath, glancing at Jason. He looked different, more vulnerable than she had seen him in years. The walls he had built up between them seemed to have cracked, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt the possibility of understanding between them. "So what now?" Jason asked, breaking the silence. His voice was calmer than before, and there was a touch of uncertainty in it, as though he wasn't sure what kind of answer he was expecting. Emma turned to face him fully, her expression softening. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice steady. "But I think we need to take this one step at a time. We can't just pretend everything's fine, like we used to." Jason nodded slowly, his gaze focused on the floor for a moment. "I know. It's just hard to let go of everything that happened. I've been holding on to so much anger, and it feels like it's been eating me up inside. I didn't realize how much until now." Emma listened to him, her heart heavy with empathy. She had felt that anger too, the bitterness that had consumed her after the divorce. It had been easier to hold on to the resentment than to face the pain, and for so long, she hadn't known how to move past it. "I've been angry too," she said softly, her voice catching slightly. "But I think we've both been carrying the wrong things. We can't go back and fix the past, but maybe we can start fresh. Not as who we were before, but as who we are now." Jason looked at her then, his eyes searching. "Do you really think we can do that? Start fresh?" Emma gave him a small, reassuring smile. "I don't know. But I think it's worth trying. Maybe it won't be easy, but we don't have to do it all at once." Jason seemed to relax slightly at her words, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I don't know where this is going," he said, his voice quiet but honest. "But I think I'm ready to try." Emma nodded, the weight of his words settling over her. "I think I am too." For the first time in a long while, there was a sense of possibility in the air between them, not one that promised everything would be perfect, but one that acknowledged the potential for change. The path ahead wasn't clear, and neither of them had all the answers, but at that moment, it felt like they were finally starting to understand each other in a way they never had before. Emma turned back to the painting in front of them, her gaze lingering on the intricate brushstrokes and vivid colors. The art felt different now, as if it too had a story to tell, one that was both beautiful and painful, like their own. It was a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful things in life came not from perfection, but from the imperfections. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. I don't know if we'll ever fully move on from everything, Emma said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. But I think we're both ready to try. And that's all we can do. Jason glanced at her, his face softening. Yeah, I think you're right. They sat together for a few more minutes, neither of them in a rush to leave. The museum, the art, the quiet hum of the city outside, it all faded into the background as they shared a moment of quiet understanding. No grand gestures, no dramatic confessions, just two people, sitting side by side, ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she could breathe again. It wasn't about the art or the past, it was about the future, and the small steps they would take to rebuild what had once been broken. Weeks passed since Emma and Jason's last conversation at the museum. The air between them had shifted, subtly but undeniably. They had begun talking more, slowly rebuilding a connection that neither of them had expected. It wasn't like the old days, filled with easy laughter and shared dreams. No, this was different. It was raw, real, and at times uncomfortable. But it was progress, and that was enough. For now. Emma found herself in the museum more often, visiting the collection she had inherited. She had started to learn about the pieces, their history, and their significance. It was fascinating yet daunting. The art felt like a reminder of the past she had tried so hard to forget, but there was something about it that kept pulling her back. Each piece was a story in itself, one that she couldn't ignore. One afternoon, as Emma wandered through the gallery, her phone buzzed. She looked down at the screen and saw Jason's name. Hesitating for a moment, she answered. Hey, she said, her voice tentative. Hey, Jason replied. His voice sounded more relaxed than it had in the past few weeks. I was thinking about you. About us, actually. I know we've been taking things slow, but I think we should talk more. About everything. What happened? What's happening? Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She had been avoiding these kinds of conversations. It was easier to let things sit quietly, to let the weight of everything hang between them. But she couldn't deny the fact that she needed, answers. I think you're right, she said after a moment, her voice steady. We can't keep skating around this forever. Jason's voice softened. I know. There's so much I didn't understand back then. And I don't want to make the same mistakes again. Emma nodded, even though she knew he couldn't see her. Neither do I, she said quietly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Emma wondered if he was going to say something else, but instead, he simply spoke. Can we meet? He asked. In person? She thought about it for a moment. Meeting in person meant confronting everything they had tried to avoid, but it also felt like a step forward. Yeah, she said finally. Let's meet. I think we owe it to ourselves to have this conversation. They agreed to meet at a small cafe near the museum. When Emma arrived, she saw Jason sitting at a corner table, looking much like he had the first time they had met there all those years ago. It was strange how little had changed about the setting, yet how much had changed about them. She approached the table, her heart racing slightly. Hey, she greeted, taking a seat across from him. Jason smiled faintly. Hey, he replied, his eyes a little uncertain. For a moment, neither of them said anything. It was like they were both waiting for the other to take the first step. Emma took a deep breath and spoke first. I know we've been through a lot. And I know we've hurt each other, but I know, we deserve to understand what happened. Why we ended up where we did. Jason nodded slowly. I think we do too. He leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. I was thinking about the art collection, he said, breaking the silence. I don't understand it. Why was it kept from me? Why was it hidden for so long? Emma shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She hadn't expected this to come up so quickly. I don't know, she admitted. I've been asking myself the same questions. I never knew about it either. It wasn't just hidden from you. It was hidden from both of us. Jason looked at her, his gaze intense. But why, Emma? Why keep it a secret? She exhaled slowly, her mind working to find the right words. I think it was about control. About keeping things in a certain way, so nobody had to deal with the mess of the truth. But now, with everything that's happened, it feels like that secret was just another thing that kept us apart. Jason's face softened, and he reached across the table, his hand lingering just inches from hers. Maybe it's time to stop letting secrets control us, he said quietly. Emma looked at his hand, then back at his face. The vulnerability in his eyes was real, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like they were finally on the same page. She nodded slowly. Yeah, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe it is. The weight of the past seemed to lighten in that moment, just a little, as they sat there in the quiet cafe. It wasn't the end of the story. Not by a long shot. But it was a beginning. And that was enough for now. The days after Emma and Jason's meeting at the cafe passed in a blur. There was a sense of quiet, gradual understanding growing between them, something neither of them had anticipated. They spoke more often now, mostly through text or brief phone calls, but every conversation seemed to peel away the layers they had carefully built over the years. Each time they spoke, it felt like they were getting closer to the root of the problem, to the truth they had both been avoiding. Still, the tension between them wasn't gone. Emma often found herself lost in thought, questioning her feelings. She had never expected to find herself here, reconnecting with Jason in this strange, fragile way. But she couldn't ignore the fact that he was starting to feel like someone she could talk to again, someone she could trust. The museum, the art collection, everything tied to that moment at the gala, had become an important part of their connection. The collection, which had once seemed like a burden, was now a strange bridge between them, a way for them to open up and share things they had kept hidden for so long. One evening, Jason called. His voice was filled with urgency, and for a moment, Emma's heart skipped a beat. Emma, I need to talk to you, he said quickly. It's about the art. Something just came up. Emma felt her pulse quicken. What happened? She asked, her mind racing. I don't know if this is good or bad, but I just found out there's more to the collection than we realized. Jason explained. There's a whole set of pieces we didn't even know existed, and it's possible there's more to the story. More than just what we thought we inherited. Emma's mind was spinning. What do you mean? What's going on? Jason sighed, clearly frustrated. I'm not entirely sure yet. But I think there are people who have been watching the collection, maybe even trying to take it back. I think there's something bigger at play here. Emma's stomach dropped. She had never wanted to be entangled in something so complicated, and now it felt like the past was coming back to haunt them both. So what do we do? She asked quietly. I'm not sure, Jason admitted. But I need your help. I don't want to do this alone. Emma paused for a moment, her mind racing through all the possibilities. She had already given so much of herself to this collection, to this strange turn of events in her life. But somehow, helping Jason felt like the right thing to do. It felt like they were still tethered together, even if it was in a way either of them had expected. Okay, she said after a long pause. I'll help. But we need to figure out what's really going on. We can't let anyone use us or the collection for their own gain. Jason's voice softened, relief evident in his tone. Thank you, he said quietly. I knew I could count on you. Over the next few weeks, Emma and Jason worked together, researching the art collection, speaking with experts, and looking into the shadowy figures who seemed to be interested in the pieces. It wasn't easy. Every step forward seemed to lead to more questions, more mysteries. But slowly, they began to uncover the truth. The collection wasn't just valuable because of its artistic worth, it was a key piece in a much larger story, one that tied back to Emma's family history, a history she had never known. The more they learned, the more Emma realized how little she truly knew about the world she had inherited. It wasn't just a collection of beautiful art, it was a symbol of something much more powerful. And with each revelation, Emma found herself wondering if the truth would bring them closer together or pull them further apart. As they sat together one evening, poring over documents and notes, Jason looked up at her, his face serious. "Emma, we're getting closer to something big here," he said. "And I need to know, can you handle it? Because I don't want to drag you into something you're not ready for." Emma met his gaze, her heart heavy with uncertainty but also with determination. "I've already come this far," she said quietly. "I don't think I can stop now. Not when I'm starting to understand what's really at stake." Jason nodded, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like they were truly on the same page. They weren't just two people from the past trying to fix old wounds. They were partners in something bigger now, something neither of them had expected. Whatever lay ahead, Emma knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to face it alone. Emma and Jason's search for answers had led them down a winding path, full of twists and unexpected turns. As they continued to uncover details about the art collection, they found themselves deeper in a web of secrets and lies that stretched back further than they could have imagined. Each day, they worked together, carefully piecing together information, cross-referencing names, dates, and locations. But with every revelation, more questions arose. The collection wasn't just a forgotten treasure trove. It was tied to a story much bigger than they had realized, a story that reached far beyond Emma's family, and even beyond the art itself. One evening, as they sat in her apartment, sorting through documents, Jason dropped a folder onto the table with a heavy sigh. "Emma, I think we've uncovered something important," he said, his tone grave. Emma looked up from the notes she was reading, her brow furrowed. "What is it?" Jason opened the folder, revealing a series of old letters and photographs. "These letters, they're from a lawyer who worked with your great-grandfather. They mention an inheritance, but not just any inheritance. There's talk of a deal made, something that could explain why the collection was hidden for so long." Emma's heart began to race as she examined the letters, her fingers trembling slightly. "A deal? With who? Why was it kept a secret?" Jason's eyes met hers, and for the first time in their search, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. "I don't know yet. But it seems like your family was involved in something much bigger than art collecting. Something that could have been dangerous. I think the collection was meant to be kept hidden, protected, until the right time." Emma felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Her family, she had always believed it was simple, just an old legacy of art and culture. But now, everything was shifting. "Who could possibly want it hidden?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jason shook his head. "That's what we need to find out." Over the next few days, Emma and Jason became even more consumed by the mystery. They visited the library, searching through archives and speaking with experts who could help them piece together more information. It was exhausting, both mentally and emotionally. Each step forward revealed more layers of history that Emma had never known about her family, and each revelation made her question everything she thought she understood about her past. One evening, after another long day of searching, Emma sat on the balcony of her apartment, gazing out at the city below. The sun had just set, casting a warm, golden glow across the skyline. Jason stepped out and joined her, his presence offering a quiet comfort. "You okay?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, though the weight of everything was beginning to feel overwhelming. I don't know. I thought I understood my family's history. But now, I'm not so sure." Jason leaned against the railing beside her, his gaze following the horizon. "It's a lot to take in. But we're in this together. And whatever the truth is, we'll face it." Emma glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I'm glad I'm not doing this alone." Jason's eyes softened as he met her gaze. "Neither am I. The quiet moment stretched on as they stood together in the fading light, the weight of the situation hanging between them, yet somehow not as heavy as before. In that shared silence, Emma felt a connection to Jason that went beyond the past, beyond the secrets, and beyond the mystery of the collection. It was a bond that had been forged in the fire of their shared struggle, and it was stronger than she had ever expected it to be. As they continued their search for the truth, Emma realized something important. The collection, the secrets, the lies, it was all part of something bigger than them. But so was their journey, and the partnership they had found in each other. Whatever happened next, they would face it together.